RJ's webinar series. I am Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Cover Journal. Today's sponsor is Zapoj, and the topic is supply chain resiliency, how to plan and prepare for a supply chain critical event. Before we get started here, I wanted to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone tomorrow via an automated email. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask any questions, please use the question panel you'll locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. And now back to today's topic on supply chain resiliency. Our presenter today is Senil Gupta. Senil is the CEO and founder of Zapoj. For more than 20 years, he has been a technology leader and entrepreneur. In 2018, he and his team launched Zapoj, an AI-based critical event management and resolution collaboration platform engineered to minimize disruptions proactively. It ensures worldwide business continuity, safety, and faster recovery of all organization, employees, assets, customers, IT systems, and supply chains. In his previous role, he has successfully led engineering and sales teams at Interactions and TGX companies. And with no further introduction, I'd like to now welcome and turn it over now to Senil.
Hey, Bob, and thanks for the introduction. And I'm extremely happy to be on this webinar. And this is in a very right moment as we were going through many supply chain disruptions and all the cost increases. With no time delay, let me go into the actual presentation. So we will be going into, I will briefly discuss about the kind of critical events that are disrupting the supply chains and what business risks these critical events have on the businesses, and then why managing these critical events is a challenging thing, and then how we wanted the future of supply chain resiliency and how Japos can help them. So this is a big picture about what we were since last at least 1.5 to 2 years. We have started with the pandemic, and that has put us into lockdowns. And then once we slowly started to come out, we still face the problems of our usual critical events like natural disasters, man-made events, cyber attacks, and these wildfires in some areas. And as we slowly evolve and trying to come out from the overall pandemic process, now we started to see ports being congested, and we don't have enough people, both on the ports or at the same time the transportation logistics side. And then we still face the other challenges that what we usually face year on year. So our complexity in managing the supply chains are increasing. And I believe this is going to be, maybe we may not have this pandemic all the time, but this is a good lesson how we wanted to be from a more reactive to a proactive side. And some of these critical events are very deep. So we need to have some sort of like a technology which can overcome this. And these critical events are global and time bound. Let's say if we have a major hurricane in somewhere in Asia Pacific, where most of our goods are exported out to the western side, and this will impact the supply chain, and maybe may not immediately impact it. In a few months down the line, the delay in the supply chain will create an excess price hike on a other side of the world, and it has some implications in terms of cost and the time. And at the same time, like we see in Europe right now, we do have, after the Brexit, we have a driver shortage, because most of the people who are from the European countries who had started to work in the UK, now they have to all go back, and that created a problem of available drivers. And now with this pandemic and all, that added an extra pressure on the supply chains. So some of these critical events are not just like an immediate impact. It will have like maybe it is not occurring on the geography where we are seeing this problem. It might have happened somewhere else, and it might have happened sometime a couple of months back or maybe a year back, and now we started to slowly see the trickle down effect of that impact. And as we see the last 1.5 years of the post-pandemic scenario, how the supply chains been impacted by sector, the manufacturing and construction is obviously the major important sectors which had a major impact. Now we see like in a shortage of goods. This includes even like in the cars, which are predominantly dependent on the chips. They could not able to roll out the enough cars that they were planned for. And then we saw the construction industry in US, especially the housing market has went up hard because there is a lack of wood initially, and then we see other appliances and even the paints, and then we slowly, this has an impact in every sector. It's not just for one or two sectors, but it's mostly like the construction and manufacturing. And these numbers have been out based on what we saw as of last quarter. And this impact is at this point worldwide. The calculated pricing based on few consulting like in a Gartner and Mckinsey, it was somewhere close to about $5 trillion of in terms of dollar value. And so how it used to be, like in a why this is in a problem, like in a, let's understand how it used to work post this pandemic and what we are currently now. As of last year, we used to have the ships that comes to our ports, and then people and the port management, they know that when the ship will be coming into the port, so that they can arrange all the offloading of the containers and making the trucks to come to the ports and load the containers onto the truck. So there is a lot of planning, pre-head planning, and the ports are just planned for a specific activity, like the capacity wise, and then how many ships they can accept for a day, and the number of containers that can be on the lot, and what if these containers are not cleared, how much of the backlog that they can take. So as they offload the containers and the port gets free, and then they will accept the new containers to come and trucks to come and pick the containers. And that's how once they offloaded the entire ship, and then they will take the next ship. So as they have enough limited berths, so they have to plan it based on as the ships come. So the planning will be mostly starts from a week before that ship actually comes to the port. So the whole chain got disrupted because the ports got closed. So if a port has been closed, obviously the container has to be somewhere, it has to be rerouted, or maybe they might have given in a wait times more than what it's been planned for. And some of these goods can be perishable goods, and those containers might have a duration of a certain time limit of till how long they can operate it with the optimal temperatures. And then all the trucks that are leading into the port, now they have to be parked somewhere because they don't have enough parking spaces within the port. So that has led to us a chain of problems where we started to now see that even then slowly the businesses, the ports are, even though it's back to operational, it's not fully operational. This is more an operational challenge rather than the pandemic related, the closures or whatever it is. And this includes both the people side of the problem and the process side, and as well as some of the compliances. Now we are going through the great resignations, and we started to see people during the pandemic time, they have moved out to a different profession, so not enough people for this trucking industry, as well as for the people who are working currently at the ports, and the ports are not at the full capacity. And that has created a major congestion in the ports, and the vessels has to wait there for 30 days a time, and that the overall chain of the whole supply chain has been, that's how it's got disrupted. So whichever is the inventories that were there in the distribution centers, now they have come short. They have to directly depend on the ship to come up and offload the containers and move the trucks to bring the goods back to the distribution centers. So now let's see, like what this will create a problem. Like for example, we in the last 1 year onwards, though we are battling with this the pandemic situation, we had gone through numerous cyber attacks on it, supply chains, and then these being few areas being locked down, and then this been opened up, and now we started to see an uneven traffic patterns, and this has made another challenging part for the trucks to be stuck in the areas. And then we were going through like these wildfires in some areas, and then our usual storms are the natural climate related activity. And this has created on the top the business risks are like it's a lost revenue and the wasted inventory. These are the two predominant business risks. And then in some industries where like especially logistics and transportation, if they have contingencies of the penalties and the in-time deliverables, that's an impact from companies which are in the logistics and transportation side. And at the end, as a customer, we do see slowly the prices to go up and short of inventory, and that creates a negative brand experience. And the overall process is not just the problem is not just within a few businesses who are operating this maybe a ships or in a transportation, or just to do within a couple of industries. This is a very wide problem, and this is something that any one business can do anything for that. It has to do with the government regulations, and it has to be more active. The problem is not stagnant, and it's not a static related problem of like, and we cannot prepare a one-time standard operating procedure and just implement that to come out of from this. The supply chain teams are predominantly they were forced to have a multiple challenges at any given point in time. And this is a survey that was done by World Economic Forum, and they were looking out like based on how the overall the climatic like the business mood and the kind of the risk events that we could see in the next short-term period for the next 5 years. And this is in a survey that was done across all the Fortune-based 500 companies and IMF and all major governments across the world. And these are the events that they have identified that we will continue to see that for the next 5 years. This is more likely that is going to happen. I know we at least since last 5 years we already had this extreme weathers, but I think we are going to see more and more of it, and then maybe something to a continuation of this infectious diseases, maybe not as severe as what we've gone through, hopefully, but there can be many more. And then the people pattern changes, like maybe not enough people are showing an interest to the blue collar jobs, or maybe the people are migrating off from places where there are port based, they were going more into inland based, and then a friction between countries or traffics. These are all the major events that we may see in future, and how likelihood this can impact it. And all these are all the major critical events, and this will directly or indirectly are going to impact the supply chains. And this may not be just limited to one specific geographical region, and it's the worldwide. So it is better to prepare well, and also this has to be not just for a couple of events. Maybe we need to prepare as businesses to handle more than one event at any given point in time. And why is it challenging for the operationally to manage this? Because we have businesses that already invested a lot on all the operational side as well as like an intelligence side. But over the years, this is more a siloed. Let's say if you see in a supply chain logistics, they have their own tools, and then the business continuity process will have their own version of the tools. and then all the overall risks events, what is happening elsewhere in the world, and how it is related to a specific business organization that is totally a separate team. And when there is a cyber attacks, it's a complete separate team. So there is a spaghetti links of people being exchanging information, and by the time I get that information, it might be too old, and that situation might have been changed a lot. So I'm more acting for an information which is much older than what's currently going on ground. And then there are a lot of technology based products that are out there, so there is integration challenges. So just because I have bought a technology, it's not as easy as just taking this plug and play and use that from the next hour. It has to be in a people side of effort to integrate that with our existing systems, compliances, and everything. So managing these supply chain critical events is not just the actual critical event, it's an internal to the organizations, how their teams are laid out, the kind of tools they were using, and also the overall process that they were following, and how we wanted to achieve a future resiliency in it. So ideally, information is what we needed, and it has to be in an automated way to collect and mine the worldwide events. So these events can be anything from a kind of tariffs to maybe some riots happening in some area, or maybe port closures. It could be any event that can directly or indirectly impact the supply chain. So information is vital, and there is a lot of information, and that is one of the big challenge now for the teams. How do they can consume that information and then mine that and extract the risks out of from that, risks specific to that organization, and whether that risk is related to the supply chain, and if it is related, then how will it get related. That's the information is the first part, but consuming that information is the next challenging part. And once we have that information, we should be able to digest that information easily, which is mostly about from a visualization side of it, like okay, where my current assets are. As the supply chains are more mobile, we can't have a static locations, and maybe some of this information that we have identified the risks, we should be able to see that is it really a risk for my current picture, like is it my okay, my supply chains are now at this current position, is that really the risk applicable to me now or sometime down the future. And this information, when you have the lot of information, and at the same time, if the assets are more dynamic in nature, then correlating is a biggest challenge for the people. By the time we realize this and do all this correlation part, maybe we are too late, or we are doing it for a wrong asset. And the third step is like now, since we know that at least the last 1.5 years, what it has given an experience, now we need to relook into our standard operating procedures. Maybe we need to plan for things to more than one critical event, and at the same time preparing the response streams, training them, and then digitalizing the standard operating procedures. Like it has to be a more dynamic way of launching the standard operating procedures and assigning it as a kind of tasks to the response team, and taking their feedback and looking at a big common operating picture about like how these teams are responding back to the standard operating procedure. Because at the end of the day, the standard operating procedures are your processes, and that will have your SLAs to meet, and it's in the people. So and as we see the people move, and now this remote work culture, that is another challenging part. So we have to continually have some sort of a training process and making sure the standard operating procedures are relevant. And next, the collaboration process is we do have now a good collaboration tools available with this real-time chat operations and web conferences, and these has to be really available to specific to managing the resiliency side. Because I cannot be just put in a chat message and anticipate some person will look for that one and react to that. We cannot just depend on one communication methodology to act for a specific event. So the information should be flow through for multiple channels, and that critical communications and collaborations is a vital part in making sure that the teams are in aligned, and when we need a people, we need it, and if they are not available, how that escalation process will go on. And it should be more automated way of escalation rather than depending on people to look for their phone numbers and calling it. And at the end, the last is the analysis part. So it will give us a kind of like analyzing data, how the overall process went through. Maybe we might have planned to do something, but at the end, when that actually those events happen and how the teams responded, we didn't meet the SLAs. It could be because of the gaps in the procedures, or maybe a lack of training for the people, or maybe even like the technology gap as well. So that analysis part will give us like what we wanted to be and how we were doing it, and what we need to do to get how we wanted it to be. So this should be the how a supply chain resiliency, rather than more a static related. This circle should be a more a dynamic, and it should be in a seamless one and fully end-to-end automated. So that's the only way we can achieve um, uh, a digitalized way of like achieving in a supply chain resiliency, more from moving out of from the static rigid based processes. Okay, so how does this digitalization and the supply chain management will overlap? So I think like an artificial intelligence is going to play a major role in this the future supply chain management. As I mentioned, this information is there, but identifying the right information is the challenge. And that's where artificial intelligence and all this machine learning can help us in consuming that overwhelming information and extracting all that features out of it, and understand um, the text that is coming in, and then filter it out and see what the risk is and how the probability of happening of that risk, and where is it happening, and what could be the trickle down effect of that risk. So that will help people a lot, because humanly we cannot do this every day-to-day basis. It depends upon more on the capability of this person, and also that experience of the person will come into a play, and this has to be something a round the clock 365 days of activity. So humanly it is in a very challenging. So that's where artificial intelligence is going to play a major role. And next, IoT is going to give us a lot of real-time feed of data. The other challenge that we are going to solve is the mobility of the supply chains, right? Since there are all this time the mobile, and it could be in a different types of it could be in a ships, or in flights or trucks, whatever it is. So IoT devices can provide the exact location of those supply chains, and the contextual information about the supply chain, about the specific supply chain, that we could map it back to an artificial intelligence to get a correlation of, okay, a specific risk has been identified, and my supply chains are at this current position, and with the contextual information, maybe that the local events that are happening, the weather that was going on in that. So what could be the best possible response for that particular risk to be provided, rather than we go for a specific standard operating procedures designed, and since those procedures was designed within a few assumptions of what should be there by the time we launch it, but not every time, depends upon the geography and the kind of contextual situation, not everything in that assumptions may not come true. So it is better that we rely on the artificial intelligence to even suggest, okay, these are the possible standard operating procedures or solutions to overcome the challenge that is there. And these are all they all has to work as a single unified environment rather than a siloed part. And that's where these platforms will help us. This cannot be a siloed point-based solutions. It has to be a platform where you have an option to add the new AI service, maybe custom to your organization. Maybe you bring in your data and you train for that data and you add your internal operational data and take the data from your partners, suppliers, and then combine that into a platform so that you get in a big picture about that, the overall process of how its things are going on. And this needs multiple roles. It needs your logistics teams, it needs your business continuity teams, and it needs your IT teams to be on the same plate, and communications and PR depends upon the things, and then your the management side of it, the executive management side of it, so that you know, like at any given point in time, where my supply chains are, what risks are happening, and what were the solutions that teams are providing, and where were we in that solution process, and what are the chances of risks that we may not mitigate that. Ideally, we should be able to minimize or mitigate the risk, and that's where this digitalization will help us. And this is not an easy journey. There will be a lot of challenges in this, because we are trying to make more a moving away from a kind of a manual process into this new technologies. It involves lot of people skills, procedures, and investments has to come. And these projects by in last 5 years, the experience that World had with the implementing these AI based projects, they are always either over budgeted or late. And so we need to organizations has to plan for this. If they were developing the solutions internally for the supply chain resiliency using this modern technologies, they need to prepare for their journey of the overall transformation, because they need to run the current systems and at the same time investing on this new technologies, and also the gap in the people skills and the overall processes needs to be digitalized. These are some of the major challenges, and which the organizations called Mckinsey and told from their researches and all identified that this will either make the projects delay or the over budgeted, and sometimes some people will left out in the middle because it has gone completely the outside their capability. Okay, so how Japos can help us in this journey, like in this kind of like the problems, and what the overall critical event management is. So it's, as we talked, it's an AI based and unified SaaS based platform, meaning it's a cloud based. You just subscribe and start using it. So the underlining part of the platform is like the situational awareness, like early ahead of the time. So these can be the events that are happening, and it's not just maybe not directly for the supply chain. It could be even for your people and life safety, or it could be your business continuity side of the organization. So you get what based on what's happening in the world and how does that event is related to you. And then we should be able to automatically react to the alerting process of it, so that we can activate the response teams in a quick notice. That eliminates the time that takes from that event being an incident to launching the teams and providing the communications and all the part. So it gives a full-fledged end-to-end cycle wherein we can move from a reactive to a proactive approach. So let's look at, in case of supply chain, how will this platform can help the organizations. So this we could get a overall mapping about like our end-to-end supply chains, like be it from your factories to a distribution centers to suppliers and to the end-to-end network. You could see visually where your current supply chains are, and you can drill it down on them, like who is providing these materials, and from the raw materials to where is the status of the current manufacturing. And then you can integrate all your data that is coming from your the IoT sensors and anything that is custom to your organization to get a real-time picture about the current the process. And then finally it takes this two information and then it will assess the risks that is happening from the elsewhere in the world and the data that is coming from the feed of the information, and it gives you, okay, these are the current risks that are that are going on, and whether these risks are really correlated to a specific alert. Maybe there might be a port closure and I don't have any assets right now which may impact, but in future there might be something that I'm anticipating in a delivery which might come into that ship into that port, and my logistics are planned to pick up that, and that there might be an impact. So it will provide us the chance of the severity of the, and in case if there is any assets that are already existing in that location, if it got impacted, then it will become a threat, and that's when basically the teams has to react to the threat, and then the overall process of collaborating the between the response teams to to address that challenge. I've taken into a quick demo of how the system will work, and then I will come back and we'll look into the so since this is a unified platform, you can add all your assets. So we this could be your critical assets, it could be your people, or it could be your facilities, equipment, supply chains, or it could be your IT related systems, all your anything to do with your organization IT. It could be the overall your services and processes. So once you added your assets, then the risk intelligence will automatically go and identify all possible risks that are happening, and it will give you a visual location about your current assets position, and then you can apply it for like in a various scenarios. You can see your current supply chains, like telemetry of your information between your from which location to which location the supply chains are moving, and then it will give you the threats that are happening. Let's say, for example, there are power failures, maybe somewhere there are floodings are happening, and then it looks through so many risks, and the threats are something where you have an assets and that got impacted. Possibly in this organization there were few assets in that area of New Delhi in India, so there have a few supply chains, then it is expecting that the supply chains will get delayed. So as an operator, all I have to do is go and launch the standard operating procedures that was planned, or it could be an incident, or it could be a notification, whichever I want to do it. So I can pick an existing pre-built standard operating procedure, and I just feed in that information and I can launch this. And then we're basically activating the response teams. And these are the risks that threats that teams can react it, or they can acknowledge it or ignore, or I can simulate the scenario. So we can provide system provides a lot of categories of risks, and under each risks we'll have the risk types. So I can go and select like the possibility of happening that risk, and then I can see where my assets are and the risk proximity, and then I can select this and then many different types to see like maybe if there are any port closures, or maybe if there are any road closed in that area. So this will give me an opportunity to the risks are already identified, and I'm simulating it how likely that is happen. And system itself do provide if there is a threat, it says that hey, that risk has become a threat to you, now you need to go and act on that. And I don't need to set this manually and always watch for that. I can create some alerts for me. So if there is any tariff changes, or maybe if there is any port congestions or severe weather, then do alert me, and you take this specific business continuity action that was planned for it. And at the same time, like I can, if there are any existing incidents that have been launched, I can go and watch their current status and where they were exactly. So this gives me a big picture about the overall my assets, the supply chains that are moving on, and then the risks and all the threats that are at any given place. And if I want to know like how we as a teams that they were doing, like in a total number of threat summary, and where my assets are placed, and how the teams are resolving this, are there anything that gaps, and whether they're meeting the SLAs or not. So I will get a big picture. So you just put this into a big wall, and this can be consumed by either from an executive teams to your operation teams and the business continuity teams. And this could be, as I said, like it could be any critical event. It could be your cyber attack on your supply chains, or maybe like you could dynamically watch your where your current by telemetry, where your existing supply chains are, and what kind of risks that you are battling with them. And these data you could integrate it with ease. So you might have like you might create an integrations, and you can add these assets either by integrations or from you can manually feed in, and this gives you an integration key where you can add it to whichever is the data source that is providing it, so you can see exactly their current location and telemetry that is coming out of from that. That's how you will integrate your supply chains and the your facilities data. So you could have your suppliers and your factories and vendors and whatnot. It provides you in a big picture about your current assets, and then you can prepare your business continuity plans as part of an crisis management and incident management. So these are some of the business continuity execution plans that are in place. So when any one of these been the threats has been alerted by the system, then operator can simply go and launch that, and these templates can be created what are the customization that needs to be, and at the end you will get an analytics on how many incidents are happening, and then how your teams are reacting to those incidents, and the mean time to respond, and where you can improve on. And this can be from your operational related or in a business related, like for example this could be your IT related challenges, and then you can see like how your systems are doing, your supply chain systems or transportation, if there are any incidents associated with that. So this is how like one of the options where the SaaS platforms can help companies in transforming it from into a more modern, using an AI and IoT, and rather than going through in-house challenges of building this platforms from the scratch. So how does this help the organization? So one, it gives you an end-to-end visibility, like you are more we're not depending on a siloed processes. So you had your supply chain tracking, you have your visual risk intelligence, where you could see all the risks that are coming, and this AI will help you on identifying the threats that are impacting your assets. And then you have your business continuity execution plans, and then launching those plans and activating the team and allocating them the tasks. And then at the end, then you can go and analyze this data and how your teams are doing it. So it provides a complete end-to-end platform. And ideally, this is how our the future of like supply chain resiliency should look like. And this is not just for one specific point based use case kind of scenario, since we need to adjust ourselves to tackle multiple challenges at any given point in time. So you need to have your people and your processes and your IT and all your existing telemetry system. If it is in one place, then that common operating picture that you get will give you a much more lead time to take a better decision, and at the same time you can be more proactive than a reactive. You don't need to wait for a event to strike you. Instead, you can start preparing yourself to minimize it if you cannot eliminate that event altogether. So once a short note on like in how this platform can unification will ideally help you. So it's basically it's an end-to-end automated, and it reduces your the fines and the late deliveries. Especially you can plan the things well, and if you something that we cannot avoid it, you can minimize it at least, and you can save your inventory, the loss of anything that inventory can bring in, and then your fines and penalties. Especially that's very important for the logistics and transportation companies to give them a head of the picture to the clients, like saying that okay, this is where currently the problems are and what we can do it based on the compliances, and also that we could renegotiate it. And then from a customer point of view, that brand experience of like the challenges that the shortfall of goods and etc., and what we can expect it. Ideally, the CM suites are it's not just a one point point based solutions. It has to be in a customized. You can easily customize it, and you don't need to look for altogether a huge integration or a new vendor to do that one. It's a simple click and drag kind of systems where you can plug and play with what you got the data, and you should be able to get in a big sense of like the problem that we're going through. Bob, it's back to you.
Wonderful, thanks. And if you do have any questions here, again, you can locate the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll get to these as many as we can. If we don't get to them, we will follow up with everyone after the webinar's ended. So we've had a few come in here. Let's jump right into the first question. How is CEM different from ENMS or business continuity solutions?
Okay, so CEM is it's a combination of as it's a unified platform. It's a combination of your risk intelligence and your crisis management and the business continuity execution side of it. In the business continuity, it will not provide the automation, but once you have done the automation, that executing that automation. And then it is in a part of your it will come up with the incident management and the collaboration and all your data analytics side. So it's a kind of summation of your end-to-end process rather than being using in a separate tools for each individual part. That's how that CEM will help to get our big picture.
All right, next question. How do we subscribe to the platform?
Oh, it's a Japos platform. You can people can go into just japos.com, and you will have a plan space where you can start within a free basic plan. And then it could be if you are interested with the platform, then you can go on for a month-on-month basis. So ideally, it starts with a number of assets. So whichever is the assets that you think are critical and what the kind of problems that you are facing, so you can just simply add those assets. If your challenge is to do with the supply chains and you are a few response teams, you just add them and you pay for what you are using it for this current month. Just like any other cloud platform, it's an self-service based, subscription based, and pay per use.
All right, actually ties into the next question. Can we integrate our own existing supply chain feeds?
Yes, so this is an open architecture platform. So we do provide all the APIs, and the integration is as simple as just few click and drags. So it could be integratable with any existing supply chain systems, which could be in another SaaS platform or in a homegrown solution, or it could be coming from a suppliers as well. So it need not to be the data which is with the organization. They can offer this platform to their suppliers and integrate their data as well.
All right. What are the sources that you pull from for the risk intelligence data?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, that data will come from so many sources. Like we get that from the microblogging sites. It could be all social media events. and then all news articles and government agencies, weather departments, and like people like agencies like CDCs, WHO, health-related organizations, and that will form the core of the data sources. I think it includes somewhere close to about 1900 odd sources at this point. And this is the data that platform natively offers, on the top of which customers can add their own feed of the data, and then the risks can be identified out of from that. It could be their own telemetry data or any data that they already acquired from another vendor.
All right, we'll wrap up with one final question here. It says, what is unique about Zapoj?
Yeah, this is the only subscription-based platform where you had all the end-to-end products that is necessary for the resiliency. And it's not just in a supply chain resilience. Of course, we are mostly talking about supply chain, but this resiliency could be for your IT, resiliency for your people and life safety. And it could be for your smart enterprises if you have invested a lot on your IoT devices, or if you have any critical equipment, then it's like one common system that you could use it for a complete enterprise wide.
All right, wonderful. Well, that wraps up our presentation and our Q&A here today. Any parting words here today?
Once again, thanks for your this event, Bob, and I hope, let's see, like, if there are any more questions, I can answer you offline.
All right, wonderful. There were a few that are, one is quite lengthy, so we'll let you handle that offline. So, and again, if we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up with them afterwards. And so, thanks again, everyone, for attending today. We hope you've gathered some great information from today's webinar. I'd like to personally thank Senel for his time here today, as well as Zapoj for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording. You may view that recording as frequently as you wish, or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.